Well, hello, Minecrafters. Today I'm showing something a little different. And what we have here is a line puzzle built solely with survival redstone. And so, line puzzle is essentially a maze that has specific rules. You're essentially tracing a line with your body on these paths according to certain rules. And if you do it correctly, then you can trigger the switch at the end and open a door or access to some other area. Now, in this case, I've actually color coded some of the intersections that tell the player how to solve the puzzle or give hints as to what they're supposed to do. And you can outright tell them what these things are or let them discover them over the course of a level. In this case, what I've done is any of the blue intersections, you must go over that plate, so you have to collect them all, and you must avoid any of the red plates. So you can see we have a few obstacles. In addition, there is a general rule for this puzzle that you can only go over each pressure plate once. If you go over more than once, it'll lock out the puzzle and you'll have to reset it and try again. So let's just walk around and ignore everything and see what happens. As you can see, we can walk through here. We can't jump. And we can't get through here because these actually have fences under them so that you have to remain on the path. So if I just go straight to the end here and flip the lever, nothing happens. And this is because we did the puzzle incorrectly. So now we're going to have to go and study this a little better and see what we have to do to solve it. I'm going to go ahead and reset it. And we're going to get like a little bird's eye view, and I can show you so what the player would have to do for this particular puzzle. And now, rule-wise, this is pretty simple. We have the required ones and the avoid ones, but there's a number of different ways that you could set this up. But in this case, in order to solve it, you would have to take this path here and go this way. And then you have to take a little jog up here, back down, and then back around to satisfy all the conditions. If you tried to go, say, this way first, what would happen now is now you can't get all the blue things without double crossing your path. So let's go ahead and solve this the correct way and see if it works. Alright, so we'll go this way first. Alright, and now we can go here. Let's double back down this way. And as you can see, this is essentially like one big combination lock that has special rules. Alright, so we did it correctly, and the door opens. Alright, so let's take a look at the circuitry now. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And this build is ridiculously big. And with all these latches, it does get a little laggy, but the good news is you're probably not going to need nearly all of these. I've included all of them just so that you have them there with the world download. But there's essentially 40 of these, 20 up on top and 20 on the bottom, corresponding to the 40 pressure plates. But in all likelihood, you'll probably just need the intersections, of which there are 16, and then every once in a while you can throw in one of the straightaway sections if you needed that for some reason. But I've wired them all up and included them just for completeness, but you'll probably want to go ahead and delete the ones you're not going to use. And I've labeled some of these to try to explain some of the optional features and what's happening. But as a brief overview, here's how the puzzle works. So each one of these flip-flops indicates whether or not we've stepped on a particular pressure plate. And in order to solve the puzzle, what must happen is that these red and green lines must all be unpowered because they all feed into one line here, and including this one down here as well. And so everything feeds into here so that when you click the final lever here on this blue track, this will unpower that torch, and if everything is then unpowered, it will be allowed to go through and activate the door. So, in order to set up the rules, and I've got these little color tags here because they correspond with the coded intersections. So, for instance, this corner intersection, we can see where this goes. So this pressure plate activates this, and this line comes down through this torch, activating this row right here. which is this first one, and I've tagged it with the green just so it's easier to see. And so in order to make the green line is the required, we have to hit these plates, is because they have these active torches, and we're going to turn them off when we hit the pressure plate. And we have some required ones down here as well. If any one of these torches is left on, that is enough to power the whole line, which will lock out the puzzle. Conversely, we also have the red line for things we must avoid. They don't have a torch on top, they have a repeater, and it's currently off. But if you step on it, it will power, thus powering the whole line, locking out the puzzle. And then finally, I have most of these have no torch and no repeater. This is because I have the access control that you can only step on each pressure plate once. In other words, you can't backtrack. Because what will happen is if you backtrack, even though they're not activating the red or green lines over there, the backtrack will activate this red line, which will then lock out the puzzle. And this is entirely optional as well. So here was just a simple example, and I do have a copy over here that is completely unset, and you'll notice that each one of these 40 switches has both the repeater and the torch, when you're going to need to remove one or the other or both to make a working puzzle. But they're there as a template. So if you wanted to cut and paste this, this is a good one to use here. Be warned though, with World Edit, for some reason it always pastes these droppers in the wrong direction, which is a real pain, and I'm a little surprised World Edit hasn't fixed something trivial like this. Well, maybe not trivial, but a glaring error. And so what I end up having to do is fix them manually, or just cut and paste a single row and rotate it. But if you have some other way of cut and pasting, that might be the way to go. So here is one of these lines here for the pressure plates, and I probably really don't need to do a tutorial since it's pretty simple to just look at and duplicate in its entirety, but I'll explain it here. So here's where the power comes in. This is just a monostable circuit. There's other ways to do this, but this one is silent, and so I went with that. So it sends a single pulse, which goes through a little bit of an inversion here, just so that we can lock out portions of this if we need to. So that will then activate one of these droppers, sending the item into the next one, powering this, which will then signify that the pressure plate has been stepped on, which will then either turn off this torch or turn on the repeater, depending which one of these that you're going to use. So then we have the optional bits. And so here we've dropped down when this is activated. This pinkish color here is an option where you can lock out the previous line so that things must be completed in a particular sequence. And you do that just by placing a torch here. And so this will then lock out the line that comes before it. Essentially what it would look like if this was coming from a previous one is the torch is would end up being packed underneath there, which is going to keep this torch off, and thus no signal will pass through. Entirely optional, and essentially it just means that the line on this side has to be activated first, and then this one. If this one gets activated first, this torch locks out the previous one, and then renders the puzzle, it locks out the puzzle from the solution until you reset it. That's optional. We also have this power drops down here, and this can power the lockout here as well if you hit it twice. And here's how that works. So essentially this line is one big long AND gate with these two torches. And so they're both powering this line, keeping this torch off. But what happens is if you press this once to activate it, so you'll see that the bit is over here now, and this torch has now turned off and stayed off. Now the only thing stopping this line from depowering and then powering up this torch is this one right here, which will now trigger if we hit the line again. And you can see that pulsed, and now that will lock out the solution of the puzzle, meaning that we hit that particular pressure plate twice. And again, it's optional just by removing either the torch or this line entirely. And so now we have finally in the gold, this is the reset that goes down the line, and that's just going to flip the bit back into the other dropper. And so again, this is pretty straightforward. You probably don't need a tutorial since you can actually see every little bit of it there. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll put a world download a link in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll just fly around here while the video comes to a close.